All right, 11.8, so our last section of chapter 11, right? We have to talk about congruent triangles, okay? So, the word congruent just implies that something has the same length or the same measure, okay? So if we say two angles or two sides are congruent, we mean they have the same length or the same measure. Okay, so it's more referring to like its size, right? So if I were to try to pick it up out of the paper and lay it on top of another one, if they line up perfectly, we say they're congruent, okay? So then when it comes to triangles, if you have two triangles that are the exact same size and same shape, you can say they are congruent. And then we have a little symbol for congruent, which is it's an equal sign, and then you have like a squiggly line above it, okay? So that means that I have one triangle here and another triangle here. We're going to say they're congruent. I could cut this one out and lay it on top of this one, and they're going to match up perfectly, okay? So angles that are lined up are corresponding, and sides that are lined up are corresponding. Or they're in the same position in the figure. Okay? And then you can use markings on your drawings to show that they're congruent. So like if I put one marking here and one marking here, that means those two sides are congruent and they're corresponding. And then if I want to say that they're different lengths, like this side is different from this side, I'm going to put 2, but then I'm going to say it's congruent to this one. So it has 2, right? So if they have the same number of markings, then they're corresponding and congruent. And then I could put a third one here to say that these are congruent. If I wanted to show these two were congruent, I'd put 1 on each. Same with the angles. So these are congruent, these are congruent, and these are congruent. Say I have 3 markings or 2 markings or 1 marking. Okay? So in 2 congruent triangles, we have 6 pairs of corresponding parts. Okay? We have 3 pairs of congruent angles and 3 pairs of congruent sides. Okay? Without knowing, so that would be like by the definition, is that the 3 corresponding angles are congruent and 3 corresponding sides are congruent. Sometimes we don't have to go through showing all of that to show 2 triangles are congruent or are the same size and shape, okay? So we have ways to do that. And the ways we have are something called side angle side. And for short, we say that side angle side, so SAS. We could use something called side side side, or SSS, or we could use angle side angle. So ASA for short, okay? And what these 3 say are, for side angle side, if 2 sides and included angle of 1 are congruent to 2 sides and the included angle of a second, then triangles are congruent. Okay, so what we're talking about is, say, this side, and then the angle in between, so here. So side, angle, side are congruent to side, angle, side, right? The angle is in between the two sides. Then we can say those two triangles are congruent. Okay? Side, side, side is just saying if the three sides of one are congruent to three sides of a second. So you don't need anything for angles here. Then your triangles are congruent. So side, 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 congruent to side, side, side. Then the two triangles are congruent. Okay? And last, angle, side, angle. So it's just saying two angles and the side in between congruent to two angles and the side in between. Then triangles are congruent. Okay, so angle, side, angle. So here's an angle, here's a side, here's an angle. Okay, then those two triangles would be congruent. And that's how we decide, right? So just need to look at markings. If any of these apply, then our two triangles are congruent. And that finishes our chapter 11, definitions and ideas for geometry.